Hello, everyone. This is your host, Stian Helling, and I am jumping on before the episode here. First of all, I just want to say thank you so much for listening in. I hope you enjoy the podcast as much. I hope you enjoy listening to the podcast as much as I enjoy making it. Um, but I just want to jump on real quick. So I had a very interesting chat with Maddie from Goron Shepherds, and everything was going well until suddenly it wasn't. So around the hour and 13 mark, suddenly all the recording just shut down. I don't know what happened. I haven't had the issue since. But yeah, there will be a little bit of a weird cut. And then because we jumped back on and we finished up recording the episode, so it's going to sound a little bit weird. But I just wanted to let you know that that happened. There's not really anything I can do much about it from here. But then when you hear something weird happening, don't be freaked out by it. Everyone's hearing the same thing as you. Again, thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you enjoy it. And let's go. Hello, 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 and welcome to another episode of Beastly Talks. I'm your host, Ian Helling, and I am very excited to have another guest with me today, someone that I haven't known for a very long time, but I have gotten to know them really well in the short amount of time that we have actually known each other, and that is Miss Madeline Briggs from Goron Shepherds. How are you, Maddie?
Hello, I'm very good. Thank you for having me today.
That's all right. I mean, how long has it taken us to get this happening? 4 months? Right? Is it 4
Yes,
months
our
ago we started talking
schedules,
about this?
I think so. Our schedules don't like to align at all, but finally we found a date. So yeah, looking forward to having a chat with you today.
Yeah. No, it's been good. And look, it's I know you're a very busy lady, and we'll get into that a little bit in a minute. But yeah, this has been a crazy difficult chat to set up. And I think you messaged me like 4 weeks ago, and you said, "Hey, can you do this date?" And I'm like, "I will make it happen somehow."
Yeah, that's very much my
All right.
life. I have to have things well planned in advance. Nothing sort of is like, oh, can you do this week? Because yeah, apart from my work and the dogs and whatnot, I have two young children, so in the background there's a lot of family commitments as well.
Yeah, for sure. All right. So now that we're on the topic of that, let's get back into it. So I know you do primarily service dog training at the moment, and obviously you're also a German Shepherd breeder. But before we get stuck into all of that, tell us, why the hell did you get into dog training? How did that come about? What were you doing up like before, and what are you doing now? Give us your origin story, essentially.
Sure. I'll give you a warning. It's a long one, and I'm just going to make a small little correction because it's super important with terminology behind what I do, and we can definitely get into that more as well. We have sort of directed our business to be heavily working with therapy and visitation dogs. And service dogs and assistance dogs are a completely different thing. So we could talk about, the differences between them as well. But just so making sure that I'm clear in what I offer, we're much more oriented around the therapy dog space.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Sorry, I must have gotten that wrong because I thought it said service dogs. But okay. Yeah. Cool. Sorry. My apologies. I
No,
stuffed that
not
up.
at
I do
all.
that from
Not at
time to
all.
time.
Easy
But
done.
yeah.
So,
So
yeah, you want me to go through introduction?
yeah. So get into
Yeah.
it. How'd you get into dog training?
I think I was just born a natural dog lover. One of my probably biggest dreams as a child was to have, a dog sleep on my bed and my parents wouldn't have a bar of it. which is quite funny now because I look at my children's upbringing and I'm like, man, I would have loved to be you. And I think they're just so overexposed to dogs and have dogs coming and going all the time. They don't really care for dogs, which is quite heartbreaking, but that's the that's the way it is. We grew up with a German Shepherd who, back then everybody had their German Shepherds, pretty well trained with the German Shepherd clubs, and training was a serious commitment that everyone did, every Sunday. So she was a very well trained dog with my dad. And I only have a few memories from her, but later on in the years, we grew up with golden retrievers. And they were
Okay.
just beautiful, beautiful family pets. Lots of fond memories from those two, Chloe and Rosie, their names were. And like my mum's got home videos of me just training them, just working it out as like a 10-year-old. No one really taught me, but I made it my mission, for instance, to teach one of them how to get the mail from the end of the driveway and bring it back up to the house. And my parents were sort of like, good luck, and I did it, and I don't even know how I did it, but but it
Oh,
worked. And I just got addicted, I guess. I got hooked and I loved it. And even through my schooling, I always had this desire to end up working with guide dogs. I always like, I'm going to work with guide dogs one day. Just think they're, amazing, amazing animals, amazing the way that they support people and how they're trained. Don't work with guide dogs, but but I've taken the next best thing, which just landed me in the dog training industry. So the first thing I did when I moved out of home was get myself a Dalmatian, which is one of the dreams of my childhood. Learned a lot by training that Dalmatian over the years. And she was actually a phenomenal dog. Made mistakes, but her temperament, her character, and her trainability were just amazing. I was blessed with her because just the relationship and the focus that she had. We got into dog sports very, very early on. So by the time she was 12 months old, she was competing in dog sports, starting with rally, moving into ANKC obedience, and then eventually into agility, which she really excelled in as well. And that just became my hobby. Like, I didn't watch TV or do much else except for just dogs, dogs, dogs. um,
cool.
and the German Shepherds came involved when I met my partner. So he's a registered ANKC breeder. Von Goron Working Line German Shepherds is his kennel. He doesn't really have any background in training at all, just a love for the German Shepherd breed. And here I am, as the crazy addicted dog trainer. So we got along like a house on fire. And next thing, sort of, dog training and the German Shepherds came together. And that's where we are now 10 years later. So, yeah.
Cool. Yeah, very cool.
um,
And so
yeah.
I know you worked with, I want to get into the therapy stuff in a little bit, but you worked as just like a regular pet dog trainer and you did behavior mod and that kind of stuff. That's where you started as well. Is
Yes.
that
So
right?
that's right. In 2014, I opened, sort of my own business, companion dog training, where I was just sort of doing it as a side thing because I purely enjoyed it, really, just a side hobby, helping out friends and family with their dogs. I worked for a couple of different dog training organizations, volunteered at my local dog club on a Sunday morning, running lots of group classes. And I just loved it, never felt like work. So I was like, that's, what I want to get more and more into, which is what's happened over the years to establishing into a full time business. And um, yeah, so probably around COVID time is when it moved from more of like a part time hobby into a full time business. I was
Yep.
doing a lot of behavior stuff, primarily pet dog obedience, which is one of my really, I guess, core passions of just having good canine citizens that are a pleasure
Yep.
to be part of the family and people, enjoy their dog. But it's draining and it's quite tiring, as people know, doing the behavior side of things. Sometimes a lot of effort and not a lot of gain always, or the gain is taxing. So um, the industry just sort of opens up some doors and led me towards the therapy dog space, and I jumped on. So just noticed more and more inquiries for therapy dogs and those service assistance dogs, that we were saying even through our puppy inquiries and things like that. And I'm like, man, this is becoming a really widely accepted and a high demand sort of thing. I need to get across it. So did a lot of professional development with courses and attending seminars and looking into that therapy dog space. And we all get into dog training because we love it, I would hope. But I have a lot of dogs. And for the past 8 years, it was sort of like I got into dog training because I love spending that time training my dogs. But every morning I wave goodbye to my own dogs and go and work with somebody else's. So when I saw that opportunity to be able to work with my own dogs again, I knew that some of them had the potential to meet the standards of a therapy dog. I was like, great, rather than, working on really complex cases with dogs that want to eat me, I can work with some beautiful natured animals that really just reinstall your confidence in canines as a species. And that there are some really lovely, lovely, beautiful, not that all, they're all beautiful, but just some real blessings that are very gentle, very calm, and really supporting people in so many different ways. And that was about 4 years ago. So I've been pretty heavy in
Okay.
that for the last 4 years, really scaling back on my one-to-one consultation and growing the therapy dog side of it. So we do run a couple of courses throughout the year where we work on training and assessment of therapy dogs and certifying themselves and their handlers. But I also facilitate myself. So I have a couple of therapy dogs that each have their own sort of field that they prefer or do best in. So I work across animal assisted education, do volunteer visits to aged care and those similar types of organizations, and then also into correctional centers too, which is really rewarding.
Hmm, cool. And that's something I definitely want to ask more about. But yeah, you are right. Like when you, especially when you work in the behavior mod side of things, right? And you see aggressive dogs day in and day out. Some of them want to kill you, some of them want to kill every dog that they see. It is incredibly emotionally taxing. And you do kind of like, I mean, I've always said that like dog trainers can't really be fully right in the head because when you're putting yourself in front of an aggressive apex predator on a daily basis, like there's something missing. There's some kind of self preservation that's missing in your head. But again, I guess another thing as well that a lot of people don't talk about is the emotional aspect of the owners, right? The owners who feel like they've failed their dog and they're scared of walking their dog and they're anxious every time the postman comes to deliver something. It's definitely a skill that you need to learn, and you need to separate yourself a little bit from what's actually going on with the other people while at the same time being empathetic and understand their struggles and try to help them out, which I've gotten pretty good at. This is what I've been doing full time for the last 8 years. But I do
Yeah.
remember in the early days, like fucking having nightmares about, not being scared of dogs, but certain jobs and like, holy shit, how am I going to help these people? And I'm so stressed because they're so stressed. And yeah,
Yeah, a lot of
absolutely
stress.
a taxing thing. Yeah, for sure, for sure. All right, so let's get stuck into the therapy thing a little bit more. I guess what a lot of people probably want to know is uh, what is a therapy dog and what makes a good therapy dog. So I
Yeah.
guess that's a good place to start.
Great place to start. And in terms of what makes a great therapy dog, apart from, of course, meeting standards that we're really drawing from peak industry bodies around what those standards and those benchmarks should be for a dog to receive an endorsement or a certification from a qualified professional. Um, a therapy dog can look so different depending on the goal-based setting that you're looking at applying it to. So I do often have some people that, their dog is very stable, very friendly, ticks all the boxes in terms of what we're looking for with assessment of a therapy dog, but they might think it's a little bit too energetic, or a little bit too playful and not, just calm and just want to sit there for pats the whole time. And that's fine because those dogs work really well in a school based setting, for instance, where you're working with younger children who are active and they don't want a boring dog that just sits there, and just receives pats the whole time. Children's attention span is very small. So after a couple of pats, most of them are like, okay, what are you here for? What are we doing? And they want to be active and engaging. So there's a space for those dogs in the industry, just like my Leon burger, which is the opposite end, who just want to sit there, lay down, not move, and just have people pat and cuddle and love. So it doesn't mean that one dog is better than the other. It's about the target audience and where you put that dog in the field. So what makes a good therapy dog is all about the case study behind it. Where is that dog going to be placed? Because we want to make sure primarily that the dog enjoys what they are doing. We don't want to be forcing our dog into a sector that is boring for them or unenjoyable. So there's so many different places, from schools to OTs, psychology, correctional centers, aged care, and they all are going to require something different from the dog. For me, I've only got one dog that I can 100% say could work a 50-50 split. He is just as happy with standing around and getting pats, and he's equally as happy being active and playing. And that's my Doberman Henry, who's pretty much retired now. As I said, Flynn, he's much more going to like that aged care, older generation setting where he can laze around and just lap up all the love. And then my shepherds, they are much more school-based dogs who want to get in there and play and interact in more of an active way. So what we need in terms of the dog's temperament, character, trainability is dogs that have a natural love and very low suspicion of strangers, and obviously people that they don't know, because they're being asked to build relationships with unfamiliar people that may have physical disabilities, movement impairments, things that some dogs might find intimidating, foreign, and potentially scary. So the dogs that we're targeting must be absolutely super stable in their nature. They obviously must be willing to receive attention and affection from strangers, have really high trust of humans, and not be nervous, skittish, or anxious types of dogs. Because if a dog has a little quirk here and there and you think, oh, well, I can control that or I can manage that. No, you can't. Not in a therapy dog space, because you cannot control the environment. You cannot control the way somebody approaches your dog or comes up to your dog. You can't manage or control the unexpected. So we need to make sure that those dogs are absolutely, I mean, they're animals. They're never going to be 100% safe, but, pretty damn close. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely.
Um,
And it's interesting. It's interesting that you bring up this, because actually I've got a podcast coming out today, which is all about at what point do you retire a working dog? And we kind
yeah.
of touch on the topic of therapy dogs and stuff a little bit there. But I think one thing that you said there is super important for people to understand, and that is that the dog has to love the work, especially when it comes to the therapy stuff, because again, we can bring about behaviors with compulsion, with pressure, right? But if the dog isn't enjoying the job, then they're going to burn out very quickly, and they're probably going to do a half-assed job at it as well. Whereas if they're actually like, hey, this is the thing that I want to do the most in the world, then they are just naturally into it, right? Which is which is a thing that I think a lot of people don't think about. Like, the dog, not all dogs enjoy being pet, right? They don't
That's
enjoy
correct.
being
Absolutely.
crowded by kids, right? And they kind of, you have to be into it in order to do a good job at it.
Yeah, and that's what animal welfare requires as well, is that, they're not a tool in a professional, allied health professional's box. The dog is a colleague and it has the same rights and entitlement in terms of participating in its work and being able to take breaks and take rests when it wants to, and not just tolerate it because the owner is asking for it. And now we do see that a lot. We see a lot of owners that have developed their own emotional connection to their dog and they don't want to leave their dog at home, or maybe their dog suffers with isolation or separation anxiety, and they go, you know what, it'd just be great if I could just certify as a therapy dog and start taking it to work with me, because then this issue would be resolved. And you can identify those dogs really quickly in courses and programs that you run. Because again, we are putting the dog through a range of different training and testing to be able to organically see that this dog does really actually live for this. This is a high motivator for the dog and they're enjoying it, not just tolerating it because it's the owner's wishes.
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think so. There's a couple of things I want to touch on there. So you've said the word stability quite a few times, and I want to actually touch on what that means. But I guess it's also worth mentioning that kind of the difference between an assistance dog and a therapy dog is that an assistance dog is for one person, a therapy dog is for multiple people. I guess that's like really the
Yes.
big distinction between the two.
Yeah, so with the therapy dog, they are, essentially known as community dogs. Now, the way that the industry sort of is looking is that even within the therapy dog space, dogs will be probably eventually, I would say, as more regulations come into place and whatnot, they'll be allocated different names. So, for instance, if you're have some type of allied health profession and you're providing therapies, that those dogs will be keeping the name therapy dog, versus if I don't have any type of prior qualification, but I have a suitable dog and I want to go and volunteer my time or get involved in different programs, they may be called visitation animals or visitation dogs. And then school wellness dogs will be school wellness dogs. But at the moment, they're all called therapy dogs, but the other language does get thrown around. Um, as well, where, as you're saying, with a service or an assistance dog, which is an interchangeable label. In Australia, we normally use assistance dogs, and overseas, service dogs is a lot more common for a label. But those dogs are actually protected under the Disability Act. So they do have public access rights once accredited. And, it means that they are not really known as a pet. They are seen as a medical aid for their handler, and they're supporting their handler with some element of a disability.
Yeah. Yeah, because that is a requirement for assistance dogs. I think that they have to physically alleviate the human's
Correct.
disability. Like, yeah, so
Yeah,
they have
yeah.
to
So
be
there's
what we
multiple
call task
exercises that they
trained.
do. Yeah, correct.
Yeah. So they have to be what we call task trained, which means I think they have to have a minimum of three
Yes,
specific tasks that the dog is trained to do. So if you're in a wheelchair, it can be going and opening doors for you or picking stuff up off the ground, like something like that, but something that is actually alleviating the physical disability of the person.
that's right. Yeah, so they're aiding that person, and that's why they get that exemption. And they are known as a medical aid under the Disability Act. So they do, have that public access right to be entering nearly anywhere with their handler. Community dogs, so therapy dogs, they have basic obedience, manners, and housebreaking and all of those basic things that we need to be entering public spaces, but they're not so much task trained. We are relying on the human animal bond for the effectiveness of therapy dogs, and primarily the neurochemistry change that takes place between dopamine and the oxytocin in the brain when somebody who loves an animal, especially somebody who's been isolated, or a vulnerable person, and the studies behind even the way that people living with ADHD or autism respond to an animal if they are an animal lover. So, those benefits of the human animal bond is how a therapy dog is supporting the clients. But a lot of people can also teach tasks to add an extra layer, especially if they are applying that therapy dog for a goal based intervention like an OT or something like that. But it's not actually like a requirement that they have to be doing 3 tasks, for instance, like a assistance, a service dog would be. That is much more going to be specific to the individual handler themselves.
Yeah. So I guess if you're going to kind of very broadly separate the two, you have an assistance dog, which is a helper for one person, and then a therapy dog is more of a mental health professional for multiple people. Is would that be roughly
Yeah, therapy dogs,
correct?
they bring comfort, support, friendship, and companionship to people at the end of the day. So, and often again, people that are isolated or vulnerable, or often people that are living with trauma. So, back to in terms of the animal welfare and a dog wanting to participate in the role and not being forced, that also directly comes into the way that we work, the way with that we train, the way that we respect the animal as well, to ensure that the vulnerable people that we're often working with also feel safe and protected too, and that we are interacting with an animal in a safe and a humane way, just as we would be with other humans.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Now, you did mention OT. What does that stand for?
Occupational therapy. So
Occupational therapy. Yeah, okay. Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
gotcha.
so
Yep.
OTs, yeah, occupational therapy is another space that it's common to see a therapy dog supporting both children, and older clients. Again, in many different ways, often they can do activities with the dog that work on their fine motor skills, lots of different things. Yeah.
Yeah, 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 gotcha, gotcha. All right. So, one other thing that you've been talking a bit about that I want to get stuck a little bit more into is the word stability. So, stability is something we often hear when we talk about dogs, and especially in the assistance dog, therapy dog kind of space. So, what how do you define stability in a dog, and how much of a dog's stability is genetic versus training? Because that is probably a question that people are going to have. And
Yeah,
I imagine you
definitely.
get a lot of applicants for therapy dogs that you can very quickly see just aren't suitable. And so how do you test, what are you looking for, how do you determine stability, and what is the importance of stability, I guess, is my question.
Absolutely. Yeah. If I forget any of the points of that question, just remind me, but I'll try my best.
I'll
So,
come back to it. Yeah, yeah.
for me personally, stability is multifaceted. So there's, multiple things that I'm looking at to be able to determine a dog whether they are stable or not. I don't think there's just like one clear, sort of explanation. But with stability, for me, I want to, well, particularly with a therapy dog, for instance, I really want to be seeing stability environmentally, because we are asking these dogs to go into unfamiliar environments. So if we're seeing nervous or skittish or hypervigilant behaviors, that would indicate that that dog is feeling
Oh,
unsure
sorry.
or
I lost you there
unsafe.
for a second.
Oh, I think we're just having a
S-
funny internet quirk.
yes, we did. Can you just jump back 30 seconds and say that again? Because I lost you there for a bit.
Okay.
So, stability in environments, just go from there.
Yeah, sure. So environmental stability is really important for a therapy dog, because we're asking them to go into multiple different and unfamiliar places. So if they become nervous, anxious, skittish, hypervigilant in those places, that's a pretty good indicator that the dog is feeling unsafe, or unsure about that unfamiliar environment. and therefore that would be classed as a certain level of instability environmentally. um, Stability with humans, because you can have a dog that is really environmentally stable and runs around happy, no stress, body language, but actively avoids people it doesn't know. So therefore that's another sector of stability. So for me, it's sort of stability is having to be seen in multiple different areas to make up the whole puzzle of what a therapy dog needs. Stability with humans is about having really high levels of trust, a really good ability to forgive, which is, if the dog becomes startled or frightened, do they then become nervous and avoidant of humans? Or do you not see that nervous and avoidant behavior because their trust of humans is so high? They're naturally forgiving. I mean, this is a test that we can do with puppies, with the pain tolerance and how quickly they forgive. Do they leave the assessor and not return? Or do they almost get groveling and biddable, oh, I'm sorry, what have I done wrong? So those things, we can test right down from puppyhood. And that obviously is genetics about how that puppy interprets that adversity and how it goes about it. So if it has a really good ability to face that adversity, overcome it, and then not be compromised in other areas, that's going to be stable. For me, that's stability as well in terms of human stability versus environmental. um, Overall arousal levels, that's a separate sector for me. You can have a dog
Mhm.
that loves everybody, goes to everybody, seems fine, seems confident in an environment, but its arousal levels are too high. So it can escalate really quickly if someone jumps around and gets excited, or you have a child, that becomes excitable and emotionally unregulated. If that dog escalates with that child, that's not really safe in a therapy dog space. So that dog might go to jumping up or barking, pacing around and whining out of excitement. And that's just, again, not going to be really acceptable. So those probably three areas are the key areas of stability that we're looking for in a therapy dog to ensure that minimal risk environment.
Yeah, yeah, cool. Yep, no, that makes sense. And again, it always comes back to the nature versus nurture, which I think is a ridiculous thing because they both play a part, right? How the dog
And I
is
think,
built genetically
yeah.
versus how it's trained, all of this affects the dog at the end of the day. So
And
it
it
isn't so much a nature versus nurture; it's a nature and nurture together.
together. But with therapy dogs, and training and management, when we put them under assessment, and we ask the owner, don't interact with the dog at this particular time, or just step aside. I want to see how the dog instinctively reacts. That shows me the genetic foundation of the dog, because if a dog is right beside its handler and its handler's intervening, telling it not to jump up, and they've done impulse training and the dog can regulate its emotion, but can the dog only regulate its emotion once it's been told to? Or does it just have great thresholds and is not quick to escalate and become aroused? Like, so the way, that we test and removing some of that handler management will really show us the dog's genetics. Yeah.
Oh, for sure. And at the end of the day, management, is needed for a lot of dogs, but it also kind of covers up who the dog actually is, really.
Yeah, 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 absolutely it can. That's right. So you really want to be making sure that you're putting a dog through multiple different tests between its obedience and its exposure to different people, different places. Every therapy dog program that I know of includes an intimidation experience as well, or multiple intimidation experiences, like how they recover to loud and unsudden noises, like somebody getting up and throwing a chair, or somebody having a meltdown, or dressing up in high vis, and sort of acting a little bit crazy. And how does the dog respond to that? Do they take flight? Do they become explosive? Do they escalate to being prepared to engage with aggressive behaviors? So, all of those
Mm.
things are seen when we start to do that testing.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. All right, cool. I feel like we've covered the the therapy dog side of things pretty well now, and so I want to get into the next part of the conversation, which is obviously going to be about German shepherds. So,
Yeah.
von Goron, working line German shepherds. You breed shepherds with your hubby, and how did you get into that, or how did he get into it? How did you meet? How did von Goron essentially come about?
Yeah, so I feel like I need him here sitting beside me to explain. I'll do my best to explain to explain his part. So, as far as I understand, so my partner used to be a chef, and his head chef was really into dogs, particularly German shepherds and pigeons as well. And he, I believe, brought my partner's first dog on the main register for him because he was a single guy and he needed a companion, and there was this litter of puppies that his head chef really liked, but didn't want a dog himself. So I think he gifted it to my partner. And I always say, Zelda, her name was, that is his first love. Great dog, and just really adored my partner Peter, and he adored her as well. We lost her on Anzac Day a couple of years ago. She was 14, I think. And my partner didn't grow up with much of a history of dogs, didn't really have pets or pet dogs, especially in his family household and whatnot. So she was a very big experience for him. Um, and he just fell in love with her and the breed. And probably with a bit of, support and convincing from friends in his workplace and whatnot, and discussions of breeding and continuing her line, because for him, he becomes so attached to her. He's like, I always want a puppy related to her. I want to be able, when she's gone, to have a puppy that is related to her. So went down that path of learning more about breeding, doing his prefix assessments, and becoming an ANKC breeder himself. We knew each other sort of through friendship groups and whatnot, but we first started properly seeing each other when he had just had his first litter many years later on with this dog Zelda. Um, and I've pretty much been around ever since. So that was
Yeah.
about 11 or 12 years ago. We still have one of Zelda's daughter, a retired breeding female, Jada, and offspring, of her down the line. So we still have that original connection to his original female Zelda. And I have the same question as you. So I was like, what is Von Goron? And like, where did that even come from? So apparently Zelda, and I'm not a video game person, so I hope I don't offend any video game fanatics. Zelda is the name of a town or a person in a game. And oh no, that's right. I think it's the name of a person or a character in a game. And Von Goron is a town on that video game. And he liked the name and the
Right.
sound of it. And it married up with Zelda. So therefore Von Goron German Shepherds was born.
Right.
um
Because
yeah, so
that's one
it's
thing that
that
I wanted
random.
to. Yeah, okay. Because that's one thing that I wanted to ask you about, and that is like there are a lot of Fons, Fon Pharrell, Fon Garon, Fon. I can't think of any others off the top of my head, but are they literally just picked names, or do they have some actual link
Oh, right.
to
Yeah, so
backgrounds, genetics, anything?
this is a Peter question because I just, mad head over heels into the training side of things and the breeding side of things, anything puppy rearing and training related, I'm across. But all of the itty gritties of the breeding stuff is much more Peter's game. But Von in German means, I believe, something around like house of German shepherds type of thing. So like way back when German shepherds first become, I guess, a recognized breed, which would be a very, very long time ago. And the original creators of the German Shepherd, that Von was in that name, and therefore has carried on, of course, through generations of retaining that Von, and then the name of the kennel itself. So
Yeah,
for
yeah, okay.
him, Von Goren Shepherds, the Von yeah, is the German Shepherd part relation, and then the Goron was the name of the town.
Right,
Does that
got
make
you.
does that
I
make sense? Am I
think
just doing it a disservice here?
no, 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 no. That makes sense. So I think like, oh, my German's very rusty, but I feel like "von" actually means from. So it's
Yeah,
almost like this
house or from that
from
place
the
or
yeah. Okay,
here we
yeah,
go.
cool. So it's
I'm
literally
doing a quick search. So is
all
German
right.
predisposition for meaning from or of? So from or of,
Mm,
often used in kennel names to signify origin lineage. So yeah, that's where it originally comes
yeah, okay.
from. So yeah.
Yes. So but the actual kennel name people just pick based on something that they
Yeah,
like or
something
sound
that
cool.
means
There's no
something.
further depth to that. Yeah, okay.
No, I mean, there could be for some people where it's very in depth for them, but generally, that's right. The actual kennel part, like, there's lots of German Shepherd breeders that don't have that von in them at all, as well, and there's a lot do, and the lot that do are normally the working breed liners, the working line breeders. It's
Yeah,
something
yeah,
to sort of retain with that original sort of working stock versus the show community, the show line community. So um,
yeah.
yeah, most people pick that name something that is special or full to them.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. No, that makes sense. Now, while we're having this conversation, let's touch on that. What's the difference between working line and show line? There might be some people that aren't fully up to date on what that actually means. So, in your opinion, what's the difference between a working line dog and a show line dog?
Great question. Probably a very touchy question for a lot of breeders and German Shepherd enthusiasts. Now for us, the German Shepherd dog originally, is supposed to be this very powerful, versatile working dog that has, really good, strong body structure, is capable of tasks that require agility and movement, has long endurance, can work multifaceted between bite work and sniff work in terms of tracking, and then also that endurance and agility side. So very, very versatile dog that has super high levels of determination and trainability. And there's so many different breeders now and bloodlines. Like a German Shepherd is such a popular breed that um, breeders pick parts of those traits, I guess, that are important to them and what they think is going to be the ultimate German Shepherd. And then over breeding and generations, you start to obviously get um, heightened traits in some area and a decrease, in traits in other areas just through any type of selective breeding. But structure is probably one of the main things people talk about in terms of the angulation of the spine and the rear end of the dog from the show world. Now, we don't do any conformation showing at all. It's just not something that we're passionate about. Some breeders do show their working line shepherds, which is cool as well, but we don't. We're much more involved in the dog sporting world, so that dog's active abilities rather than the conformation side of things. Um, I have seen fantastic dogs across both. So, there's some great showline shepherds that have really stable drives, great personalities, and vice versa, with the working dogs. So I don't think there's, like a clear cut, they are one
Mm,
breed, but there is very much a divide between that particular breed, probably more so than most other breeds. Um,
mm,
but I think it comes down to really what the individual kennel is striving to achieve with their bloodlines that they are breeding. And for us personally,
yeah.
the ultimate German Shepherd for us is a dog that has more of those natural traits that they originally had, the versatile traits, the ability for their body to physically be able to, run around an agility ring with without effort and have that strong rear end that can support them and their bone structure, um, have really high levels of determination. So for me, the word drive gets thrown around a lot, and what drive means is different to different people. But for us, it's determination. So dogs that, if they want something, how determined are they to achieve it? Sometimes drive gets muddled up with arousal, a lot of the times, I think, and that is completely something different. So we want to blend in a perfect balance between that. Dogs that are highly determined, which means they have great determination to achieve what they are motivated by, and aspirations for training, handle a focus, things like that. And arousal levels are obviously important to give you any spunk and spike. Without any arousal at all, you're a couch potato. And with too much arousal, you're jumping off the walls and you cannot focus and you cannot maintain
Yeah.
concentration and regulation. So, dogs that have a stable arousal level, that don't become over aroused or hyper aroused, which unfortunately we're seeing a lot of. And I think most trainers will agree in German Shepherds, there are a lot of them with hypervigilance and hyper arousal behavioral problems. And that is primarily genetic. Now, don't get me wrong. Any dog, if you go and stick it in a small backyard for 8 to 10 hours a day, 5 days a week, and give it no attention, can become hypervigilant and hyperaroused. But I'm talking about fulfilling a dog in its breed purposes correctly, giving it enough attention, enough
Mm.
time. Some of those dogs still have massive arousal and vigilant issues, which is that genetic component. So we want
Yeah.
a really stabilized arousal level. So, dogs that can still be part of the community and go out into public settings and maintain their composure, but will work for you all day if you ask for it. But as soon as you come inside and bring the dog in, they can switch off. They're not whining and pacing
Mm.
around the house, looking for more, unable to regulate. Once you've told them that's enough and to calm down, they can calm down, and they don't need to be worked all day, every day. They can do either. They're flexible, they're
Yeah.
versatile.
Mm. Yeah, cool. No, that makes a lot of sense. And I guess like my kind of super simple version of this, when I talk about working line versus show line, is power versus looks. That's kind of what I break it down to. Like, how much output does the dog have to give you? The more kind of power and gusto and drive they have, the more working line they are, the more they have a specific look, whether that is anything from ears to tails to coat color, length, blah, blah,
Exacerbated
blah,
features.
then
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, then they're a little bit more on the shoreline side of things. Now, one thing that is interesting there, and this is a problem that I have seen a lot in the last few years, especially, and I'd love to hear your take on it. I feel like I'm seeing more and more kind of working type dogs like your German Shepherds, like your Rotties, etc., that people are claiming have a lot of prey drive and they're working line, but what they actually are is just hectic. And so people that are breeding these hectic and again like unstable arousal type dogs and calling it drive. So do you just want to give your take on what the difference between a hectic dog and a drivey dog would be? I guess you already touched on it, but like, yeah,
Yeah.
what would your definition be on that?
Well, I even know, with some of the breedings that I've seen, even, breeders, they might be breeding for hyperarousal because they believe that that's going to give the dog endurance in sports, for instance, and that's their opinion and they're entitled to that, but I don't believe that. So, and that even everything comes down to everyone's individual opinions and beliefs, of course, at the end of the day. But I have dogs that can work all day without breaking a sweat, regardless of the weather and the temperature, and that are determined. Now, not that I would let them, but are determined to do it, and will do it if I ask them to do it. That, as I just explained before, have brilliant off switches and can also go a day of just lazing around the house without demanding, without getting in your face, without becoming anxious or skittish or hyper vigilant and hyper aroused, needing constant mental stimulation or not knowing how to regulate themselves. Like, for me, that is an imbalance between excitatory and inhibitory behaviors. So when we're looking at neurochemicals in the brain, with GABA and glutamine and things like that, that's genetic. So if a dog has too much excitability and not enough inhibitory, or too much arousal, not enough inhibitory, that's a genetic thing. You're going, no matter your training and your management, or whether you opt to intervene pharmaceutically with that dog, the dog is going to be like that regardless. It's going to need
Yep.
constant attention and management. So that is where I think the whole mismatch between people using word drive and prey drive and speaking to arousal, though, rather than actually drive
Mm.
itself. Drive to me is determination. So if I
Yep.
have a motivator, does that motivation drop off with exposure? So if a
Mm.
motivator drops off with exposure and becomes mundane, that dog has lower drive, lower determination. The more access they have to it, the less interested they are in it. A dog that has what I call, optimum and ideal drive levels, determination, um, you get full focus, you get sustained
Mm.
focus, and you get full engagement off the back of that motivator, whether it is, play, toys, prey, ball, whatever it may be. The motivator is going to change for the dog. But if we talk about this, like, I can't even remember where I heard this a long time ago, but it is a great way to explain it. If the dog's ball or a treat goes under the couch, a high drive dog will pull that couch to smithereens to get their ball or their treat out. A lower drive dog has lower determination. It's not going to go to the effort of destroying that
Mm.
furniture to get its ball or its toy. It might poke around and scratch around the edges for a little bit, or gnaw on the side, and then go, too hard, I'm going to give up. And that
Yeah.
has nothing to do with arousal. Yeah. Like, that's different.
Mm.
Arousal is how quickly that epinephrine, or that adrenaline in the brain, and those excitability receptors increase, and how long they stay up there, or how sustained they are, how the dog has the ability or not to be able to regulate, and what it requires to be able to regulate and come back down into a stable frame of mind where it can offer sustained behavior, where it can focus, and where it can make tasks, make decisions on tasks with clarity.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think that's a great explanation of it. And this is a few years back, but I remember someone asking me to define what I thought prey drive was. And this is what I boiled it down to. So, drive to me is a dog's innate desire to acquire a specific reinforcer. That's kind of that's the sentence I boiled everything down to. It's like the dog that will go through glass to get to a ball. That dog has a very high innate desire to acquire that specific reinforcer, right?
Yeah, which is its
And I
determination
always
right
say
there, isn't it? Like,
100%, 100%, yeah.
yeah,
And I always say like specific reinforcer because um every dog's different, right? And like you said, like one dog might climb a 10-foot wall to get to a ball, but wouldn't really run very fast for a tug toy, right? So it kind of all depends on what the dog's actually into. And I guess one thing uh, that a lot of people go like, what makes a good trainer? Well, to me, it's a human that is really good at working out very quickly what drives a dog, right? What gets the dog interested, what keeps them interested, what keeps them want to go like, hey, I want to do this thing with you. So I guess that's one of the things that we kind of get pretty good at working out. Like we hold out a ball, are you interested in this? We hold out a tug, are you interested in this? Hold out a treat.
Yeah.
Like what, how do I get you to do anything essentially? Um, and just coming back to that as well, it's funny because I know you've only met Agna once, I think,
Yeah, yeah,
but
yep.
it's funny with him because the amount of people that ask me, like, does he have drive at all? Because he literally just follows you at like half a kilometer an hour, like wherever you go. And people just go like, does he have drive at all? And I'm like, yeah, it's quite scary when you like when you
When
go
you turn
pedal
it
to the
on.
metal kind of thing. Oh, when you turn it on, it is quite frightening. And he has freaked out a lot of people going from just being the stable, calm dog that he is to a full prey monster, right? And yeah, so I think you summed that up really well. But yeah, it's a shame to mistake arousal for drive because arousal becomes such a big problem so quickly. And now the dog can't leave the house without screaming on the leash. And again, that's not the dog actually looking for anything. That's the dog just going, fuck, I can't control myself at all.
Yeah, and it becomes a very big arousal, becomes very big, an emotional state of mind issue. So that dog becomes so heightened and so frazzled that they have that unstable emotional state. And drive is completely
Yeah.
separate to that. Yeah.
Yeah. 100%. All right. So moving on. So
They do
I
have
heard this
before we move
quote
on, they
a
do
little.
have a relationship though, because, in terms of
Oh, yes.
building a frustration and things like that, like, yeah, they do have a relationship, but they absolutely are different things. And a lot of people don't speak to that. So, yeah.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And that's a really good point because they do go hand in hand, but one has to kind of drive the other. So when a dog goes into prey drive, arousal has to go up because you need that adrenaline, you need that dopamine, that seeking to come out of the dog. Whereas if you have a dog that's not actually looking for anything, but is just high on adrenaline the whole time, yeah, that's a whole different thing. So yeah, no, that is a good point, and I'm glad you brought that up before I continue rambling. So now I heard this sentence a while back, and I cannot for the life of me remember who said it. I think maybe it was Ivan Balabano, but I'm not 100% sure. So I'm paraphrasing, but essentially, a good breeder should try to breed the perfect dog for themselves. Right. And so I guess at the end of the day, if you're really particularly drawn to a particular dog or a particular strength or power in a dog, then that is always what you're going to try and get out of a litter. And I guess a lot of breeders would keep puppies from their own litter that are displaying those specific traits. Now, that being said, what is a good breeder to you, and what should people look for and ask about in your opinion? So I know this is a very touchy subject, but again,
Oh,
we're here to have difficult
a great
conversations. That's what it's
question.
all
And
about.
it has a big scope, it's such a great question. And the scope is so big because obviously you have the genetic side and all of the health that also falls into that category as well, and around ethical breeding of animals, and their rearing and their house, keeping and all of those sorts of things. And then you also have your client relations as well, like whether a breeder is going to support you post that acquisition of the puppy, their level of support and how long that's going to last for, and do they offer, if something's not going to work out, to take on that puppy back, or there's sorry, like, it's a massive, massive thing. But a good breeder, of course, for us personally, I would say first and foremost is going to prioritize their breeding animals. So they have to be doing what's right, for their breeding stock. Here we have females and we outsource our males. So if I say females, it's because that's what we have here. And that comes down to, methods of getting that mating and that breeding occurring, the vet care that the females are supported with. So all of that determines for us what's a good breeder. If my dogs have anything suspicious, anything outside of, a normal checkup and normal health vaccinations and things like that, I don't really deal with your GP vets. I just go straight to a specialist in that area because I've learned over time, and all my dogs have pet insurance because it, of course, is more expensive. But by having that pet insurance, I can go to the best of the best and not have to worry about the financial side of things. So, um, yeah, GP vets are like GP doctors. They have a lot to deal with and a lot of scope to know a bit about everything. But when it comes to the nitty gritty, is a specialist in eyes or a specialist in nutrition or a specialist in joint health is going to be able to give you the fastest, clearest advice and information, and often have many more additional tests that they can provide than your standard GP vet. And I want those answers as quick and to be able to create as little stress on my dogs as possible. So rather than go through everything with the GP vet and then still have no answers and have to be referred on, these days I just go straight to a specialist in that field, get those answers as fast as possible, get my dogs healthy as possible, and in the fastest and less stressful way, because going into a vet clinic is stressful for a lot of animals as well. Not only is it normally associated with a lot of negative type of prodding and poking, there's also all the scent related stress from other dogs urinating, and releasing stress through the urine, and the scent markers picked up by other dogs and whatnot too. So just the environment of a vet can be a stressful place anyway. So there's that side of it in the way that we raise and offer care to our animals. You also have um to look at making sure you're doing all your health testing where possible. So anything that we can health test, a good breeder will be health testing it, not just saying, oh, well, my dog didn't seem to ever have that in their lifespan, so, they must be clear, because, dogs can be carriers or affected, and that's going to depend on who you pair them with. So making sure that we complete any health testing that we can. And of course, when we have those results, always striving to move towards clear, non affected dogs. Um, then you have the raising of the puppies. So, how those puppies are housed, the enrichment, the problem solving challenges, the nutrition, the handling, the maternal access they get to their mother, those things are so important to the puppy that you hand over, at 8, 10, 12 weeks old, depending on the breeder. People, I think, don't understand the importance of that. They think they can just buy an 8-week-old puppy from anywhere and be like, oh, it's young, I've got enough time to fix it, and I'll make sure I socialize it and I'll make sure I train it. But this comes into that epigenetics as well between generations. If females are just stuck in a concrete compound and bred and bred and bred, and they're not interacting with people, and they're not on a good diet, they're not receiving enrichment and brain stimulation, that will affect puppies. It will affect that puppy's resilience. It will affect that puppy's health. It will reflect in that puppy's ability to cope with stress, problem solve, frustration tolerance. So that makes a good breeder by how much time and effort and knowledge that you have to be able to put into your puppies. Raising puppies in puppy raising protocols, there's a few, that are common for breeders to use. And then leading into that post acquisition care when those puppies leave us. So, we obviously run a dog training establishment as well. Not all breeders do. So we don't charge any of our puppies to return for training. They can come and train with us, because the most important thing for us is that those puppies are in training, getting an education, getting out, getting socialized, getting environmentally exposed. If they can't train with us, then we'll be inquiring with them, asking them questions. Well, where are you going to enroll? Where are you going to be training your puppy? Not just handing a puppy over and waving goodbye, selection process, puppy applications, questioning, Zooming with your puppy owners, not interrogating them, but genuinely being interested about their level of knowledge and their experience and their level of commitment to this puppy is so important to be able to place the right puppy with them. Doing puppy assessments. I don't like to call puppy assessments character or temperament assessment because I genuinely, in my opinion, feel that it is just too young to see or label a puppy as this or that. What we sort of the language that we use and the terminology that we sort of talk about is a puppy assessment so that we can identify the strengths and weaknesses of that individual puppy that allows us then to develop a protocol to pass on to the owner and support them with any weaknesses and support the strengths of that individual puppy, because no puppy is going to be perfect, but also puppies and their tendencies and their traits are going to be more or less suited to certain owners lifestyles and their level of experience. So being able to assess accurately, but without labeling it like, oh, this is going to be a really friendly puppy, because we know how critical that um, brain development is in the first 16 weeks, or 12 to 16 weeks, but also to at least 6 months, if not up to 18 months at the different stages of development. And you can, say goodbye to a puppy that you think is probably one of the best puppies in the litter. And if you're keeping a puppy, might have been on your keeper list, and then it has a traumatic incident in that sensitive stage, and then the puppy changes. So I don't like to call assessments for puppies character or temperament assessments because I think it locks in a word, then people get a little bit blasé around, their puppy. I like to call them assessments, and it shows me that puppy's individual strengths and weaknesses, and then we can address them as necessary. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, in the terms
And
of
and look, I just want to stop you there for a second because I
go
want to
for
get
it.
into what what happened. Why am I suddenly hearing an echo? Sorry,
Oh no.
suddenly I could hear myself, and I wasn't expecting that. Um, but yes, so one thing that a lot of people don't really know about or hear about, just to go a little bit back about what you were talking about before we got into puppy temperament testing, but uh, stress in utero is a massive thing that really can affect the puppies that are born. And essentially what that means is the level of stress in the mum while she's pregnant. So how does that like, I guess one thing, one of the reasons why puppy farms are so bad is because obviously the fucking horrible
Conditions and like,
areas
yeah,
that they
yeah,
live in, conditions and everything,
the obvious
but
things, and yeah, yeah,
the obvious things, but then you have the stress levels of the mother, which actually affects the development of the puppy in utero, like so even before they're born.
yeah.
And I just wanted to touch on that because that's one of those things that a lot of people don't even know about, like how's the puppy affected by the mother being stressed before they're even born, but it does make a big difference. And so do you want to like quickly just talk us through what might be happening there and how to kind of prevent it?
Yeah. So, I mean, I don't have any, magical terminology, but just in terms of a basic explanation, and this also happens in humans as well. So, if we have mothers that are highly stressed and releasing a lot of cortisol, because of that stress. So that cortisol has negative physiological effects on the body in terms of increasing, heart rate and blood pressure and all of those sorts of things, which also happen to the baby puppy too. And then is going to have those brain development issues, well, potential brain development as well, in terms of that puppy's susceptibility to stress itself and how it deals with stress and copes with stress. Stress, prolonged stress and complex stress, is no good for anybody. We know that it contributes to lots of different physiological things, and puppies are going to be the same. So if your female is exposed to particularly long duration or chronic stress, where those puppies are constantly being exposed to higher levels of cortisol in utero, then you're going to be starting with a puppy that is already more likely to become stressed itself and have negative effects of coping with stress. And we know that for canines living in a human world, a lot of the things that we expose them to are stressful because they are canines and we are humans. And it's, and we have different environmental living conditions. So, yeah, if we can reduce that stress level and therefore produce more resilient puppies that have better stress tolerance and less stress overall, then that's going to show behaviorally in our animals. And that's what I'm
Yeah.
saying about, getting veterinary care as quickly and as efficiently as possible too. Because if you have a pregnant female who is particularly stressed in the vet clinic and has to have reoccurring vet visits and things like that, well, yeah, you're absolutely going to have those puppies in utero being stressed out. So, yeah, I hope that answers.
But yeah, no. Yeah, no, that's great. And again, it's all these weird things that a lot of people won't know about, right? And one thing that we do know is that prolonged levels of cortisol, which is the stress hormone in the body, very often leads to obviously a low tolerance for stress, where they get overly stressed very quickly, but also prolonged cortisol leads to a lot of anxiety, which I guess I don't know about you, but that is a very common theme for me who deals with a lot of reactive and aggressive dogs. They are poorly put together genetically and they are like almost genetically anxious. And that anxiety
Yes,
and that fear turns to aggression and the cycle just continues. So that is definitely something, well, one of the big issues with puppy farms and I guess shitty backyard breeders, right? We just don't get the good genetic material to work with to begin with.
to start with.
Um,
Yeah, yeah.
exactly, yeah. Because at the end of the day, like one thing that I always say to my clients is, I can change so much of a dog's life with training, but the one thing I cannot affect is DNA. I just that
Yeah.
you can't do anything with that, right? So the genetic makeup that the dog has, that is always going to limit us in any way, form, or shape. And again, so the better the genetic material, the stronger the dog we have, the less issues we're likely to have, etc., etc. Which is why promoting good breeders and healthy breeding practices and ethical breeding and everything is so important. Um, all right, so health testing. Let's talk about that real quick. I know we've been rambling a lot, so we're going a little bit over time here, and I'm sorry about that. But
Yeah, I can talk a lot.
let's
Sorry.
no, but that's good. Like I love this, but I don't want to take up half your day, essentially. But health testing. What are the most common things that should be tested for in pretty much any breeding pair or dog or bitch?
Oh, good question. It's so varied. I couldn't give you a definitive answer because every breed, like so for registered pedigree dogs, under the ANKC, you will have your, and this is per state even, there's not even, it's becoming more national, but it's actually still per state as well. That's made up by that breed council in what they think are the key components of health testing for that breed, obviously by testing for the things that that breed is most susceptible to be affected by. But then there's also, additional testing. So you've got your mandatory testing, and then there's additional testing that can be done. But that can change significantly per breed. So, some breeds you have to test eyes for juvenile cataract, like lots of different things. And then for others, you don't need to test that because it's not something that that breed is predisposed to. There's always, you have the option to be able to do it in addition, but it's not one of the mandatory ones. So it's huge. Yeah, it's very much per breed.
Yeah.
With shepherds, obviously being a breed that's prone to hip and elbow dysplasia, we have schemes for that where the dogs get x-rayed at about, well, minimum of 1 year.
Oh, what? It said that it stopped. Interesting. I have never had that before because here it says it's still recording. Um, okay. Do you know what we'll do? I'll stop recording now and then it'll save that. And then we can start a new recording. We can just finish up our chat and I'll just put the two together. I have no idea what happened. I've never seen that before. But yeah, I'm just going to stop it now because then it saves everything. That might actually be the issue. No. So what I'm going to do is I'm literally going to press stop on the recording now, so we're not going to jump out or anything, and then I'll just start a new. Okay, cool.
Okay.
So now we should have a new recording going. Can you see me now? Does it
I can't. No, I can
say?
hear you fine.
Hmm,
Oh,
how very odd. Okay, but it does seem to be recording though. And again, because I am literally just posting sound, do you
yes.
just want to finish
Keep going.
everything up?
Yeah.
Yeah, let's
Yeah.
do
Yeah.
that because then I'll just pair. I'll like, put everything together and that kind of stuff. So now I can't remember where we were. We were in health testing, and I think we were talking
Yeah. I
specifically
was.
about German shepherds.
Yeah, I was just saying I can only. I mean, the breeding stuff definitely, is the side that I lean on Peter versus the training, which is all me. But with the
Sure.
health testing for shepherds, which is really the only breed that I can comment on. Of course, the hip and elbows. We were just talking about the X-ray scheme for them, so they get X-rayed minimum 1 year old, and then they get sent off for interpretation, and they get given a result or a breakdown of results for different areas of the joint, and then that gets a number result, and it goes by numbers. So obviously the lower the better. With German shepherds, a grade 1 on the elbows is acceptable, but we always strive where possible to be breeding from dogs that have 0 0 elbows because it's a better score, but also because with anything that the parent I guess anything that the parent has themselves, the offspring is generally going to be worse affected, if that makes sense. So,
Mm.
even if you're breeding with acceptable levels of something, if it's on the higher of the average, well, then you're going to be expecting that some of the puppies or a puppy in that litter could be worse off, worse affected. So, you want to be avoiding that wherever possible. So
Yep.
we do want 0 elbows, and then the lower the score on the hips is ideal. So they are allowed to get a maximum of 16 with no more than 8 per side. So if you got, a really good on one side, but over 8 on the other side, then that's not acceptable. It can't be any more than 8 per side with a total of that 16. But usually with our dogs, we've been producing pretty nicely. We've had some, dogs score really, really low. And then most of our dogs sort of sit within the average of around that sort of 7 to 8, which is the sort of average for the breed in the year of results. So they get an average out of all the different breeders' results that are submitted. So we have that information to work from. Your DNA testing for all your hereditary diseases, and DM is another one for German Shepherds. That degenerative myelopathy, which is the loss of that um, my brain. We've been talking too long. I've lost my words now.
Yeah. Uh,
The nerves,
yeah.
in the rear end where they lose their mobility. So it's different than the actual arthritis and the hip dysplasia. It's more of actually a nerve damage that they become often incontinent and lose that mobility in the rear end.
Yeah, sure. And look, that kind of makes sense because I never thought about that, but obviously the health issues a brachiophiliac dog is going to have is going to be very likely very different from what a German shepherd or a long-nosed dog will have. So that
Yeah.
kind of makes sense that you test different things depending on the breed.
Yes.
So no, that's I'm glad you cleared up on that. Now, okay, there's one word that I often hear when I hear breeders talk that I don't really know much about, and hopefully you can enlighten me a little bit on that. But that is epigenetics. What is it,
Yeah.
and why do people keep talking about it so much?
So epigenetics is really, I guess, how behaviors and the environment of the animal, like diet, stress, exercise, socialization, enrichment, those things affect the way that the genes work and the display of the genes without actually changing the DNA sequence itself. So it means that the things that I do in the, let's say, as an umbrella term, the environment can either positively or negatively affect the DNA genes of the dog. And that's where it comes down into like housing and nutrition and diet and things like that. And they say that this is goes back 3 generations with your epigenetics, or the most significant, is that 3 generations. So, um, for example, like if somebody does have a puppy farming environment or even just a environment where their dogs are all caged up in kennel compounds and not receiving mental stimulation and the right nutrition, lots of attention and activities, then without even changing the actual DNA sequence itself, you're going to get change on the way that the genes work. Um, and this is my understanding without being an
Okay.
epigeneticist.
Yeah, sure, sure. Go for it.
So, for instance, let's say, basic example, I have children. So, by raising my puppies around children before they leave me without actually changing the DNA sequence, those puppies and their offspring are going to be naturally more receptive and accepting of children because of that fact that in their genes they have that exposure to have more trust and more resilience around, a small child and the noises and all of those sorts of things. Does that make
Mm.
sense?
Yeah, so it's almost like writing a history book into the actual genetics of the dog.
Yes, well, I have heard like a little example, before, of like thinking a DNA is like instruction manual, like a cookbook, and then the epigenetics are like little notes, or little sticky notes that you put in there that tell the cell which recipes to use and which ones to ignore. So you
Yeah,
can
okay.
do fine tuning and selecting, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, no, that's a really cool way of looking at it actually,
It's
and
sort of
and that does make
complex, and
sense.
it's something I understand more than can articulate, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, but it's very important in breeding because whether you are positively if or, negatively affecting epigenetics is gonna happen if your dog's receiving poor diet, is exposed to a lot of stress and exercise, because it's gonna make those genes less resilient. But, positively affecting epigenetics is super important, because there's lots that we, can do easily, and it's really just about ethical and proper pet care, giving your dog, proper diet, reducing stress exposure, adequate housing, lots of attention, and environmental exposure is really important too.
Okay. No, that's super interesting, and obviously I have to look into that a little bit more. Now, for anyone listening, we've had some
Yeah,
internet
yeah, I'll
issues
be.
along the
I'll have some
way.
homework now. Oh, sorry to cut you off.
Yeah. No, 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 that's all good.
I
But
was
I'm
just
just
saying
saying
I'll
to
have
anyone,
homework now to get a sentence for myself to try to explain epigenetics in a clear, concise way.
yes, sounds like a
Yes.
good idea. All right. Now, I do want to just mention to anyone listening, we had some internet issues. Everything broke off here and we had to start over again. So there's probably going to be a little bit of a weird cut in the middle. But we are pretty much finished with everything that I have to ask you. So now I do you have any last words, anything you want to touch on? And then after you've touched on that, spookier stuff. Where can people find you? How can they work with you? How do they find your therapy training program, etc., etc.?
Sure. So no, it's been lovely to chat. And thank you for inviting me on. So we're located in Milan. With our Von Goron German Shepherds, you'll find us on social media. I'm terrible at technology, so although we have Instagram, which is actually under companion dog training, I don't use it. So Facebook, and breeding websites like Dogs Online, and of course our website Von Goron GSD and Training is where you can find us.
Excellent. Cool. All right. Well, Maddie, it has been a pleasure chatting to you. And I don't know, I've learned a lot. I can tell you that for sure. Like I said before we started the conversation, I know how breeding works, but from a physical point of view, but I don't actually know much more about it outside of that because I've never been involved in breeding in any way, form, or shape. But this has been a very
Well,
cool
I
conversation.
there's a science to it, but at the end of the day, I always say to people, science versus nature. The science tells us we should get a certain ratio of things, color and coat type and all of those sorts of things, or you pick parents that are going to complement each other, but the puppies can turn out completely different to what you wanted. So until you start doing repeat matings with the same parents, you can't really guess or guarantee anything because Mother Nature might just throw you something different.
Absolutely. And at the end of the day, like we always say, genetics are always going to be a roll of the dice. You
That's
can
right.
plan for the perfect puppy, but, again, nature decides what happens.
Yes,
Awesome.
that's
All
right.
right.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Cool. Thanks so much for coming on. And to anyone listening, you probably know what I'm going to say now, but thanks for listening in. And now it's time to go and train your dog. Goodbye. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Beastly Talks. I hope you found it interesting and that you'll join me for the next one as well. If you like this podcast, please take a moment to rate and review it so that more people can hear about it. Or if you think this particular episode would benefit a family member, friend, or colleague, be sure to share it with them directly. You can follow me on social media at Viking Dog Trainer on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. Thank you for your support and keep training your dog.